Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome. All are welcome to my show today. My name is Kelly Jackson, and I'm still not canceled on this gloomy day with thunder and lightning outside in Tennessee. And that is the only thing I can say that I don't like about living here in Tennessee versus the other states out west that I have lived in is we have more rain here in the summertime than I'd like. Thank you for joining me today. As I said, my name is Kelly Jackson. This is Still Not Canceled live stream, my first live stream. This is probably how I'm going to be doing things from now on. It just works better for me and my in-house editor for me to get content out as timely a fashion as I possibly can so that you know what you need to know as soon as you need to know it. And that way I'm not, on his tail to get things done, get it out, because I've got to put this out. And this content is getting old because the news cycle, as we know, it sours like milk in a 100-degree day outside. It's stinky. It's not good. So anyway, today the show is going to focus on, for years, and I do have notes. You will notice me peeking at my notes because I tend to be a tangent talker. So I'm going to try just to peek at them and not use them like a script because I don't write scripts. I pretty much talk off the cuff, but I need notes so I stay on track. For years, conservatives have asked for more common sense. I mean, years. Let's think about it. Really, I started to understand how bad things were getting after the first 2 years of Barack Obama's term, but really, like the Tea Party era happened for a reason, right? But, when his first term was up and we had a presidential election, and I was just so, like, by 2012, I was absolutely certain that we were just in so much trouble. And I've known since 12. In fact, I lost one of my best friends from college. She didn't used to be one of those people who wore the hats, but she turned into one, and she unfriended me until after the 2012 presidential election. And we never have become friends again, which is probably a good thing. Anyway, so for years, we have asked for more common sense. Like I just said, more accountability, than Barack Obama. Then once Barack Obama, we did have Donald Trump for 4 glorious years. And then 2020 happened, and we all know what happened with that. But we wanted more accountability, more merit, more election integrity, and fewer endless wars. While things may not be moving as fast as many of us would like, they are moving. They are moving. I'm going to prove it today. Stick with me, because the question isn't whether everything has been fixed. I don't believe we're going to fix things. If you're a Bible-believing Christian like me, I don't believe things are going to be fixed. I think the only time things are going to get fixed is when Jesus comes back, and we don't know when that's going to be. So what our job is, what our mission is to be the salt, the light, the common sense, the people who push back, the ones who call for accountability. That's our job. I don't think we can fix it. But the question is whether the direction of the country is changing. And I do see those changes. Don't let doom posters convince you that nothing is happening. I see it every day in my social media feeds, and I'm telling you, things are happening. It's just they're under the radar or they're very incremental. But I've got 4 stories today that are going to prove to you that things are shifting in the right direction. We're going to be talking about the schism between Donald Trump and the GOP Senate and what that's really about. It's not necessarily really about an appointment, is it? It's about something else. We're going to go over that. Then I'm going to show you a story about the Supreme Court legacy. We have, 3 justices produced by President Trump's first term, and the legacy that continues to reshape America. We had the DOJ rejected a legal theory that pushes, things like DEI. And so we're going to get into that because there was Supreme Court rulings that led the DOJ to go, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about the FBI investigations into the Skid Row voting allegations, and that's about election integrity. Do you think that Joe Biden or Barack Obama would have sent the FBI down to Skid Row to talk to homeless people about how much money they got for voting? I don't think that they would. So we're going to talk about that. And then finally, we have to cover something with the Iran war. I know that it's going to be, it's an opinion piece from the Federalist, but if the people who wanted endless war, which would be people at the New York Times, are angry that the war may be ending, perhaps that's a sign that we're moving in the right direction, because the president is trying to broker peace, and there are people in the Middle East that every time he tries to broker peace, they start shooting at somebody else. We all know who we're talking about. So we're going to talk about that. So it's going to be a long live stream. I will be chopping this up into shorter clips. But if you want to hang with me for the next hour, then you're welcome to it. And again, my name is Kelly Jackson, where we are here at Still Not Canceled, and we question everything, especially the narrative. So let's jump right in to the first story, and let's try and get through these in a pretty good clip. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you with this Hill article from the Hill. Okay, so we know what it's saying, and I've put show notes in the description box so that you can follow along with the links to each one of the articles that I'm going to be covering today. But the article basically is, the Hill says, Senate Republicans, Trump relationship phrase over FISA, Iran deal, and the SAVE Act. And so let's get into this article real quickly. President Trump's relationship with key Senate Republicans, including Senate Majority Leader John Thune, is crumbling after repeated clashes over strategy on an array of issues. The two sides are splitting further apart as the midterm election nears, and GOP lawmakers fear the potential loss of both chambers of Congress. Okay, so what are they screaming? They're screaming, we're going to lose, we're going to lose, you need to do what we say, or we're going to lose. Well, why are they so upset? First of all, if guys like John Thune are upset with the president, I think that that's a good thing. That means that he's not doing what they like. We know they're rhinos, right? So he's doing something we like if they're not happy. GOP senators say that there has been a major loss of trust between the president and many members of their conference as the White House has repeatedly blindsided Thune and other Republican leaders. How has he blindsided them? Let's look and see. Trump will have a chance to discuss his differences with Republican senators in person this Wednesday, so the day after tomorrow, this Wednesday, when he's invited to speak to the steering committee on Capitol Hill. Senator Rick Scott, who is the chair of the steering committee and a close ally of the president, extended the invitation. The president undercut, here's the first part. The president undercut GOP leaders last week when he suddenly ordered Jay Clayton, his nominee to serve as director of national intelligence to replace Tulsi Gabbard, to not show up at his Senate confirmation hearing. The reversal of the plan left Thune and other Republicans dumbfounded. Senator John Cornyn of Texas, who lost his Senate Republican primary, he was not endorsed by the president, runoff by 27 points after Trump blasted him as very disloyal and endorsed his opponent, said Republican colleagues are feeling betrayed by what some of them view as the president's lack of respect for them as senators and, in most cases, loyal Republicans. Okay, what is the president trying to signal to these guys? It's not about, which a lot of the people that I know have been saying, well, Trump is becoming establishment. It's about party loyalty. It's about party loyalty. I can see how it would be perceived that way because it's really, he endorses guys like Lindsey Graham. I don't know that it's necessarily towing the party line so much as it is somebody that he is certain he can get them to do what it is that he wants them to do. But to say that they're indignant because the president basically kind of flipped the script on them is sort of, that's mighty big of them to be saying that. In my case, this is John Cornyn. In my case, there was no real reason given my support for the president's agenda. Cornyn said, describing the confusion caused by Trump's unexpected attacks on him during the Texas GOP primary runoff, which came even though Cornyn had voted with Trump 99.3% of the time. And I can tell you, so let me look at my notes here. So what do we have? Trump unexpectedly halted Jay Clayton's confirmation hearing, frustrating Senate leadership. A frustrated Senate leadership to me is exactly what we want, right? Senate Republicans claim trust between them and Trump is breaking down. The conflict appears to center around FISA, the SAVE Act, and competing priorities within the GOP. So let's talk about some of that stuff. When he endorsed my primary opponent, people realized you could never do enough to stop the president from endorsing your primary opponent. In other words, he says, I can't make him happy enough. I vote with him most of the time. The problem is you're not voting with him in ways that matter to him, number one. Number two, you're also not voting with him in ways that fundamentally change the institution that we know is our government and the Republican Party. That's what Donald Trump has been actually trying to do, is change the institution. What they're trying to do is maintain the institution to the best that they can until Donald Trump is no longer president. And then what can we do? Oh, we'll just go back to business as usual. So we'll start with the FISA program. So when we're 5 months out from a major election, we historically have headwinds. This is Tom Tillis. You've got to be pitch perfect and you got to execute with precision. We can't surprise the president and the administration cannot surprise us. Every time we do that between now and November, we're diminishing our chances of holding our majorities. So they're running around with their hair on fire. If we're not on the same lockstep all the way down, and they want control of the agenda. Guys like Tom Tillis, guys like John Thune, all of the establishment hacks, they want control of the agenda. Tom Tillis cited the extension of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and the annual defense authorization bill as must-pass bills that are now in limbo. And then Republican senators are growing more and more frustrated over Trump's unrelenting calls to pass the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility. So the Save America Act. Okay, so what's happening here? Trump told the guy that he chose to, I've forgotten his name already. Trump instructed his pick to replace Tulsi Gabbard, Jay Clayton. Jay Clayton has been instructed not to show up to his committee hearings so that he can then be placed, like technically placed in Tulsi Gabbard's, job, in the DNI job. If you put somebody in the DNI job, then you can go ahead and you can get that FISA program back in place. Well, here's the problem with that. That FISA program was horribly, horribly abused. So what is the president trying to do? He's trying to leverage the fact that, okay, I have a nominee. We know you guys need to approve him. We also know that you want him approved as quickly as possible so that you can put the FISA program back in place. The conflict that they have there, of course, is that conservatives believe FISA abuses have never been adequately addressed. And I think a lot of people would agree with me on that, is that the FISA, all of the abuses that took place during President Trump's second run at the White House, even the first run at the White House, was utilized with the abuse of the foreign intelligence surveillance court application process. They, like I said in one of my last videos, they would pull in some kind of foreign entity to justify the use of the FISA court instead of a regular court, and they horribly, horribly abused that program. Trump may be signaling, which I think it's more than maybe signaling. He may be signaling that business as usual in Washington is over. As I said, I believe almost certainly that they are trying to maintain the institutions that we have come to loathe, hate, and despise. And they're just trying to beat the clock. They're just waiting out the clock until he is no longer president, and they can go back in and they can implement all of the aspects of the institutions of government that we hate as the citizenry, as we the people, that essentially sort of frees us out of having any say, which our government is ground up, not top down. At least that's how it's supposed to be. They've been operating it from the top down, and now it's our turn. I think this, to me, is a huge sign that the president is, the fact that there's a schism between the president and Senate GOP leadership and that they feel betrayed. I'd say that we're exactly where we need to be with that. And he's utilizing the leverage, the thing that he knows that they want. He's not going to give it to them. He's not going to let them have those committee hearings and put that man in place, so then they can just go ahead and put that FISA program in place with no changes whatsoever that will then just continue to violate Americans' privacy rights. I mean, it was horribly abused. Look at Carter Page. Look at all the things that happened during President Trump's first and second run at the White House. We've got to fundamentally change these things, and the president knows that. So the bottom line, what if Senate Republicans are frustrated because President Trump, is refusing to let them simply wait out his presidency and return to pre-2016 politics? And that's exactly why I think they're frustrated. They want to keep these things in place, and he is trying to dismantle them. A story like this really should be discussed more frequently, because they are, then of course they talk about, Kim Strassel, which I normally like her. Cornyn on Friday circulated a quote from the Wall Street Journal's Kimberly Strassel, who criticized Trump for making unrealistic demands related to FISA that could risk national security, and warned that failing to work constructively with GOP lawmakers is accelerating his lame duck status. I don't believe that. I think he's acting on behalf of what he knows his base wants, and we do not want bureaucracy that invades our privacy, this is stuff we didn't vote for. And we know our government has been imposing these things on us for decades, that now there's an opportunity. There's somebody at the top that wants to change it. So this is the first story that I have. I encourage you to go read the whole thing. I've put the link in the description box, and there's just tons of evidence if you know how to read it. I feel like when I read it, I said, oh, good. He's frustrating them. That means they're not getting what they want. That means we're getting what we want. That's the bottom line. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shrink this, and I'm going to make myself bigger. And we're going to remove that. And then we're going to go to the next item. We're going to go to the next item, which is a is a Federalist article that I found really interesting, and I think it's another indication that we are getting what we want and they are getting less of what they want, which is what we like. So, story number 2, Trump's Supreme Court legacy continues to reshape America. I saw this article initially. I think his name is Kenneth Branca. He's an attorney and he specializes in defenses, basically. Defenses. That's what he does. But he's a really smart lawyer. And he talked about this, what happened with the DOJ. And the name of the article is The Federalist DOJ Rejects Legal Theory That Pushed Employers into DEI Quotas. So let me go over to this article and we're going to read a little bit of it. And you can see, because, I mean, aren't we just sick to death? We don't live in a meritocracy anymore. Since the 70s, since about the early 70s, we have had to deal with companies structuring their hiring policies around a ledger that tells them how many women, how many Black people, how many Asian people, how many white men, how many they and then of course we have intersectionality, but it was less it sort of turned Title VII, which is the federal law that is supposed to keep people from being discriminated against. It sort of turned it on its head and made it so that companies felt compelled to do exactly the opposite. So let me just read this. The United States Department of Justice issued a stunning opinion. According to Berkeley Law Dean Erwin Cherminsky, he's right, but it is probably more accurate to describe the opinion as stunning and brave. What could the Department of Justice's top-tier minds in their skunk works, the Office of Legal Counsel, have done to elicit such an immediate reaction? OLC explained in clear prose that disparate impact violates the Constitution's privacy, or the Constitution's promise that everyone must be treated equally. Less than a week after the Supreme Court recommitted our colorblind Constitution, which the colorblind, what they're referring to there is the redistricting case that came out of the Supreme Court that said you can't prove that they are redistricting based on race, they're redistricting based on politics. And if you can't prove otherwise, and I mean very distinctively prove otherwise, then you've got no case. So for those of you who don't know or understand what that phrase means, disparate impact, it means that now you have to prove, before you can go to court and file a lawsuit, you have to prove that whatever it was that you were deprived of, you have to have it's a higher threshold, a higher bar of evidence to prove that you were discriminated against based on race, sex, sexuality, any of the things in Title VII that make you essentially a protected class. You have a higher threshold to have to prove that. So that has pretty much been thrown in the dumpster. Let's see. In this new opinion boils down to OLC, DOJ, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, tasked with enforcing many civil rights laws, rejecting so-called disparate impact liability. That type of liability comes from a 1971 Supreme Court case called Griggs versus Duke Power Company. In that case, the court rejected the use of an intelligence test for hiring when the test was not significantly related to successful job performance and disproportionately negatively affected Black applicants. In short, if a company's hiring policy was neutral on its face, but disproportionately affected some races, then the policy could leave the employer liable. So by rejecting that approach, what the Office of Legal Counsel did was declare that the EEOC's longstanding guidelines on disparate impact liability under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is unconstitutional as applied. This is not a minor technical correction. It is a thunderclap, a return to the text, history, and original meaning of both Title VII and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And it follows straight on the heels of the Supreme Court's decision in Louisiana v. Calais, that's the redistricting case, which applied similar logic to race-based applications of the Voting Rights Act. So why this matters is that why I'm bringing this to you is that because President Trump put 3 justices, more conservative than not. Granted, have I been thrilled with everything that has come out of Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, or Coney Barrett? No. However, because as a corporate body, because those 3 are there, when it comes to things like this, they tend to lean more conservative than liberal. And that is a legacy of Donald Trump. Donald Trump did that because but for the court producing all of these really good holdings recently, like this one, now the Department of Justice cannot oversee, it says it can't overturn Supreme Court opinions. But for a long time, OLC opinions have been seen as persuasive authority by both federal and state courts. Indeed, the Iowa Supreme Court just relied on an OLC opinion as support to recognize that race-based scholarships are impracticable or illegal under Iowa law. So that comes into play as well. We're talking about the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard. That was the case with all of those Asian students where they filed a lawsuit against Harvard because it was very clear that they were being set aside because of the fact that there were other students that got worse entrance scores, but they met the quota for race or some other reason. But these students proved, and the Supreme Court agreed with them, that they were being prejudiced against them because they weren't Black or whatever, women, whatever. So I'm bringing this to you because essentially these are my talking points. Okay, the DOJ is rejecting a legal theory that critics say pressured employers into race-conscious hiring and DEI policies. We know this has been going on since the 70s. Affirmative action is what started it all. The move reflects a broader shift away from outcome-based policies and back toward individual merit and equal treatment under the law. The DOJ's position is consistent with recent Supreme Court rulings that have moved toward a colorblind interpretation of the Constitution. President Trump's appointments of Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett continue to shape major legal and cultural battles years after they were confirmed, and they will continue to do so for years to come. They're not old, they're young. They're in their 40s and 50s. They could sit on the Supreme Court for another 20 or 30 years, which is huge for us. Many conservatives view this as another step away from affirmative action and DEI policies that prioritized group outcomes over individual qualifications. The larger cultural shift is toward merit, qualifications, personal achievement, and equal treatment regardless of race. The bottom line, this story is another example of how Trump's judicial appointments continue to influence American institutions. While politicians might come and go, Supreme Court decisions can shape public policy and culture for decades. So I would say, and I mean, a lot of people would say, just the Dobbs decision. Think about how huge that is for our culture, that we overturned a Supreme Court precedent that came out of the horrible Warren Supreme Court. And we have essentially, they worked on it for 50 years. Basically, abortion, on demand is no longer the law of the land. So that by itself, but the Supreme Court that President Trump helped to constitute is still pushing us in a direction more to the right, more common sense, better for our society than we have been. So there's another story. That's story number 2. We're going to move on to story number 3. Again, I would encourage you to go back to I've put the link in the description box for that Federalist article. I would encourage you, go back and read it, go in, dig a little bit into there and do some research on it so that you have it's kind of dense, but it's a very, very good article. So I would recommend that you go in and consume that on your own time. So now I'm going to go on to story number 3, since we're at 30 minutes. We don't want to go on and on and on and on. So I've given you 2 examples so far of why conservatives should not be black-pilled. I know that the Iran war is consuming a lot of our social media, and there are definitely very strong opinions on both sides. But quite frankly, I think that the side that is screaming for more war is going to lose, because we know that perspective is not popular with the majority of Americans. And I think that that's the reason why the president is it's almost like he's playing King Solomon and he's trying to split the baby, because he's trying to just get the bombing to stop, just trying to get people to stop shooting at each other over there. Why we need to be engaged in that? I mean, Israel is our ally, and I get that. And for reasons that are biblically prophetic, I get the need to protect the land. But the problem is you've got that country who basically wants to blow the other country off the face of the planet. And they're utilizing the premise of, well, if we don't get them, then they're going to form a nuclear weapon and kill everyone. How many years have governments been saying that this is going to happen? Yeah, they're crazy enough and they want world domination. There's no doubt. They hate us. They hate Israel. There is no doubt about that. These are religious fanatics, and they are going to do whatever they have to do, but they also know they don't have the firepower to overcome a superpower like the United States. But what I feel like Israel sort of does is Israel is like a kid on the playground who's best friends with the biggest kid in school, and he goes around picking fights with other kids, because when the other kids decide that they are going to engage in a fight with them because they've picked one, then Israel just points to the United States and goes, okay, you want to take me on? Go ahead, because you're going to have to deal with him too. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting tired of that. It'd be one thing if they were going after Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself. And that's one of the keys of this memorandum of understanding, is that if Israel is attacked, it has the right to defend itself. And the vast majority of what it uses to defend itself are weapons we made and we gave them, and we give them money. I support that. What I don't support is boots on the ground. I don't support us losing men and women in uniform on behalf of another country, on behalf of even that country. Even as an evangelical Christian, I don't believe in that. So I'm kind of getting off track, but we're going to come back here. We're going to go back to Iran at the end of the show. I got a little bit off the rails, but we're going to talk about now, before we get back to the Iran situation, I'm going to talk about how the FBI has swooped into Los Angeles. We've had a lot of stories since the LA mayor's race has sort of, I guess, been decided, which I hate, but apparently it has been decided. And what the federal government has done, and again, this is another one of my pieces of evidence that even if you're not happy with the situation in the Middle East, a Donald Trump in the White House as president right now is 150 million times better than the alternative that we would have had. And because you disagree perhaps with one or two of the policies, we've got to admit that we're on the same page with the president. Even if it's just the one, you're on the same page with him with, say there's 10 issues, you're on the same page with him with 9 of those. I think most of us would say that. But this is another indication that we are having some effect out west, because would this have happened under a Biden or an Obama administration? I don't think so. And the president is very sensitive, obviously, to this sort of situation. Clearly, he feels as though Spencer Pratt has had an election stolen from him. I think objectively, the word stolen is not necessarily correct, because the way that the election laws are written in California, it's perfectly legal for you to have a universal mail-in ballots, and it's perfectly legal for you to count them in perpetuity until you get the outcome that you want. So that's what they do there. So that's why I have said in past videos, it isn't as though there's this elections system in California that functions the way that most people think is sane or legal in most other states. It's that they have basically changed the laws so that it's been codified. The rigging was codified, and it's not illegal. It's not scam. It's not fraud. Now, this, on the other hand, you could say is fraud, because let's see, we've got federal election probes are a step toward restoring faith in voting. So some stakeholders in LA have exploited homeless voters and lax voting rules to entrench their power. No kidding. Now the Trump administration is investigating. I don't know that I have ever, and as a native Californian, George Bush was in the White House. I don't remember ever another president being interested in how California votes, even a Republican, because that was always, 54 electoral votes. You would think we used to be a red state. You would think that the Republicans would want to look into that and figure out how that happened and perhaps try to do something about it so that we could get those 54 electoral votes. But apparently, none of the neocons cared all that much to figure out how that was happening. So now the Trump administration is investigating. Let me make sure that y'all can see this. Yeah. There's a homeless guy. Plainclothes federal agents spread through Skid Row this week to explore possible election fraud, including reports that homeless people were paid to complete voting forms, forge signatures, and cast votes for left-wing candidates for mayor. So they were given a choice. From what I understand, they were given a choice of Karen Bass or Nithya Raman. I don't guess they really heard of Spencer Pratt, but even if they weren't given that choice. Here's your $4, here's your $2, here's your $5, and we need you to fill this out. We need you to sign it. Even if it's a smiley face, we'll go ahead and just initial it. And that's what they were doing. You can't do that. It's illegal. I don't care if it is a state or city level election. That is illegal no matter where you are. Once again, LA's top federal prosecutor, Bill Asali, has done great work probing allegations of fraud that state and local officials have scant incentive to address. Scant incentive. That is so true. Let's find out more. Investigating alleged Skid Row voting bribes, along with other claims of election fraud in California, are a key step forward restoring public trust in Golden State elections. It's just true. Most people feel so, what's the word? You just feel demoralized. You don't feel like you can go and vote in a voting center in person, at least in California. Washington, you can't even do that. They don't even have voting centers. It's all vote by mail in Washington. But at least in California, you can show up to a ballot box or to a voting center. You can cast your vote in person. But at that point, it's kind of like you still know that they can count votes until they get the number that they want. So essentially, you're marginalized. If you're a conservative, you're completely marginalized. And I can't blame Democrats for that. Who do I blame? Neocon Republicans who basically sold out the state one piece at a time for their own self-serving agendas. They were greedy, feckless, and squishy, and they didn't care. They didn't care. This is a state who has had Ronald Reagan as their governor. We used to be solid red. I say we because I'm a native, but it's just what it's become is just a hollow shell of its former self. Since the June 2nd primary, California has been a global laughingstock for its lax guardrails on voting, ban on voter ID, slow system of late vote counting. Nithya Raman had a 43,000 count vote drop just for her, like 2 or 3 days after the election. An anything goes election process that's so sloppy, it's hard to tell where the chaos ends and the fraud might begin. Meanwhile, true to form, the LA City Council is plotting to make things worse. Zealot left councilman Hugo Soto Martinez led a council majority to advance a plan to let non-citizens, including illegal immigrants, vote in LA elections. An insane proposal that would erase what few voting controls are left, dilute citizens' voices, and deepen distrust of a broken electoral system. After the June election, the California Post found thousands of homeless voters registered to vote at shelters where they were not living, including one shelter with no beds. It's fair to wonder what happened to the thousands of ballots that were mailed to those locations. They have ballot harvesting. It's completely legal in California. Given Sacramento's reckless policy of papering the state with ballots, with no controls on who returns them. The big difference in the 2024 election from 2020, everybody knows this. Objectively, you have to agree. The reason I was fairly certain that they couldn't do what they did in 2020 was because of some of the voter integrity endeavors across all of the states, including Tennessee, but we didn't really have, we were a red state and we went for President Trump. But there were states like Wisconsin, some of those swing states that I think Ohio completely circumvented its own state constitution to implement universal mail-in ballots because of COVID. So knowing that they didn't have wholesale access to all of these mail-in ballots that would just be floating around out there, I was fairly certain that they wouldn't be able to hijack another presidential election, and thank God they weren't able to. And then on top of that, people were just ready for it, and we showed up en masse at the polls. And as President Trump likes to say, it was made too big to rig, and that's exactly what happened. It says the feds should investigate all of this and more, and I really think that they are. I think they should, but I'm fairly certain that now we're going to get some results. And Sacramento should clean up the system. Among other changes, California should send mail-in ballots only to voters who request them. So basically more like absentee, require each voter to submit his or her own ballot, require voter ID. When you go to the polls in California, you can show them your Costco card. I don't even think you have to do that. Like, I don't even think you have to show them anything that proves you are who you are. Sorry, guys. I got a phone call. Anyway, let's hope I'm still up live. I am. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, it's ludicrous that California counties continue to process ballots for a month after an election, and that's the bottom line. That really is the bottom line. So I'm really hopeful, and again, it's just one more piece of evidence that I have that proves. So here's my talking points for story 3, and I have the New York Post article in the description. And I encourage everybody to go read it. But federal investigators are examining allegations that homeless individuals were paid to register and vote in Los Angeles. We know that there's already been one woman that was adjudicated for it. Critics argue California's election system has been structured in a way that prioritizes ballot collection and turnout over transparency and voter confidence. Yes, because why? They don't care if you're happy. They don't care if you have confidence in it. All they care is that they win. For years, conservatives have argued that election integrity concerns were ignored, dismissed, or labeled conspiracy theories. Exactly. The significance of this story is that federal authorities are now investigating the allegations rather than immediately dismissing them. Again, do you think that would happen under a Barack Obama administration or a Joe Biden administration? Or even a George Bush administration? I don't believe that it would. So again, we're seeing things happening. Are they huge things? Are they things that are gonna, like, are we having tribunals and sending people to Guantanamo Bay? No, we're not. But these things are happening that would not be happening otherwise, I don't believe. So again, another reason to stop being blackpilled if you are. Whether the allegations are ultimately proven or not, which I think they will be, the larger story is that election integrity concerns are finally being taken seriously. Many conservatives believe that if Donald Trump were not in the White House, and I am one of those, investigations like this would never happen in the first place. And I don't care who you are, you have to agree with that. You have to agree with that. I would think that if it weren't for President Trump, if we had a President Kamala Harris right now, do you think any of this would be happening? What do you think the world would look like if she were in the White House right now instead of Donald Trump? So Iran aside, the MOU aside, I think most people are actually happy with this peace deal, but we're going to get to that right now. So anyway, last one, story number 4. Peace is not weakness. If the people who wanted endless war are angry that the war may be ending, perhaps that's a sign that we're moving in the right direction. And it's another Federalist article. Let me share this instead. There we go. Let me make sure it's up. There we go. And you get to see that guy's nose hair. Isn't that fun? Woo! Let me go ahead and take the nose hair out of frame. Okay. New York Times writers are mad about the war ending. That means Trump is on the right track. President Trump seems to be trying in earnest to end the Iran war that we embarked upon on Israel's behalf. That is probably a triggering assertion. I can't say that I disagree with it, except that none of us want, if it's based on the premise that we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon because they're crazy, then yeah, I'd say we can all be on the same page with that. But because of the geographic disadvantage that Israel has and the fact that they are our ally and we historically have always defended them, then you could probably make the argument that we did embark on this on behalf of Israel specifically. And it's upsetting all the right people. If New York Times columnists Bret Stephens and Thomas Friedman are disappointed, the president is doing something right. It's kind of like there's more Mr. Nose Hair. It's kind of like like with the Senate GOP leadership. He's got them all in a kerfuffle. Good. If they are unhappy, it means he's doing something right. These are the Israel First type people who are the anathema to Trump's stated 2016, 2020, and 2024 campaign agendas. They're not uninterested in what Trump said were his priorities. They're directly opposed to them. Here's what Friedman said this week, and the link is in the article, but they've put the quote, after Trump announced that the U.S. and Iran had reached the early stages of a settlement to the war. Trump sold out America's ally in the war, Israel and the Arab Gulf states, for the swing states of Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Michigan. He had to stop the war now to get prices down by November. I know historically that's what we're used to. We're used to presidents sort of putting a Band-Aid on things so that their approval ratings go up so that they win the midterms or there's some election coming up. I get it. I get being jaded. I get it. But I really don't believe that. I know he wants to give us some relief, but honestly, I think it's more about giving us some relief. And also, we do have to keep the Senate. We do have to keep the House because the last 2 years of his presidency will just be all about impeachments and tribunals and committees, and then we won't get anything done. His legacy will be basically stymied and set on a shelf. I know he did get a lot of the legislation through that he really wanted the first 2 years. They were pushing really hard for that. Really, the last remnant of everything that we really need is the Save America Act. So I think he's going to be really pushing as hard as he can over the next several months and using every piece of leverage that he has to get that across the line. He had to stop the war now to get prices down by November. So Trump did what he always does. He abandoned all principle and all allies and put his personal interests above all other considerations. If you're talking about Americans, then yeah, I guess you can call that personal interests. He is not like Joe Biden or Barack Obama or George Bush. This isn't about his own personal agendas. His agenda is the American people and America first. I still believe that, even though there's been this 2-year distraction in other parts of the world. I think what he's trying to do is get back here to manage those things. And every time people stop shooting over there, Israel fires a rocket and causes problems. That's just the truth. And they need to stop. They need to stop. But I just don't think they're going to. They want total obliteration. And we shouldn't be involved in that. I just would encourage you to look at this article in its entirety. I believe that, like this last paragraph, there are strong arguments on both sides as to whether this war was worth it. Many of us are simply ready for it to be over so we can move on and refocus our problem-solving skills within the borders of this country rather than across the Atlantic Ocean. If that bothers all the right people, and hopefully the president sees that as a good thing. So that bothers all the right people, and hopefully the president sees that as a good thing, and he doesn't let it get under his skin so then he pivots again. He needs to really listen to his gut more often than I think he does. That happened with COVID, and I remember him sitting in the Rose Garden and telling everybody, yep, we're just going to shut down for 2 weeks. We're just going to shut down for 2 weeks, and thinking, good. It gave me some relief to hear him say that. Well, then we all know Scarf Lady and Fauci cornered him in the Oval Office by himself and convinced him that it needed to be longer. And then off there we were for, 2 full years, depending on where you lived. Effectively, the world shut down. And it was so that they could effectively affect a national election. That's my opinion. And that's what I think. And I think that's what a lot of other conservatives think. So, The bottom line is peace through strength has been a conservative principle for generations. The objective is not endless conflict. The objective is achieving peace while protecting America's interests and allies. And I think there's nothing unreasonable about that. And so I think that the louder the neocons scream about perpetual and constant war, I think they're going to lose support because Americans just don't want it. I don't care how much Fox News you watch. Nobody wants that. At least 80 to 90% don't want it. I would assume, based on polling I've seen. I do watch Rich Barris. I think he's a good example of a great pollster that gives good information. But America just doesn't have the stomach for a 25-year war in the Middle East. Not anymore. It used to happen under George Bush and other neocons. We just don't want it anymore. So bottom line with all of these stories, I hope I've been able to pull together for you a clear picture that regardless of where you are with the president on the Iran issue, he is in good faith trying to put a stop to the fighting so that he can come back and deal with the domestic issues that we all know need to be managed. And again, I think each one of these stories shows how, because he's president and because the levers of bureaucracy that lie underneath the executive branch in his office, they are going after things like the voter situation, voter integrity issues in California, and gosh, what is wrong with me? The fact that the Senate GOP leadership is upset with him because they want to push through a confirmation so that they can get those FISA warrants back in place. Why? Because they know they can abuse those. Well, the president is utilizing that. First of all, I'm fairly certain he's not all that crazy about that program because it did affect him personally. So he's not just falling in line. They are trying to push him and show him they're the ones in control. And in reality, you aren't going to do that with him, because if it's going to be down to who's got more power, he is going to push until you understand he's the guy in charge. So, and I know that they're representatives of the people, but for how long has it been that most of them don't represent us? They represent themselves and their own interests. I trust the president more than I trust John Thune. I just do. I trust the president more than I trust my own two senators, quite frankly, here in Tennessee. So what does that tell you? And then of course, the Supreme Court legacy that is going to last for us, hopefully for the next couple of decades at least, that we will have a court that definitely leans more conservative than not. So, and even, hopefully we keep Alito and Thomas for another decade. That would be nice. I don't know. They're both getting up in age, especially Thomas. I think he's 80. Anyway, that's what I have for you today. Again, I'm going to be chopping this up into clips so that you can just take the pieces that you want to digest one at a time. But those are all reasons why Republicans should not be black-pilled. Conservatives should not be black-pilled, because we do have a president that I do believe cares about our country. We're getting some stuff done. It's kind of flying under the radar. You just really need to know where to look. And I'm going to do everything I can to help you see it. That is my goal here at Still Not Canceled, where we question everything, especially the narrative. My name is Kelly Jackson. I thank you so much. If you, jumped in here and you watched me for a while or even the whole time, I appreciate it. I would love it if you would like and subscribe and, join the community. I appreciate you, and I will see you again soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.